Hello, this is Rich Tomasini with eXp Realty. I used to be a real estate appraiser, so I created a CMA class for agents to understand how realtors approach value. I welcome you to join our video and see what you think. My name is Rich Tomasini. Nice to see some of you guys again, and it's nice to meet you guys, for the ones I haven't. I'll give you just a touch of background. I'm a college dropout, so in order to reconcile with my dad for dropping out of college, he forced me to become a real estate appraiser. So I moved from Gainesville, Florida back down to South Florida, and I was an apprentice for him. For 2 years, you need to be an apprentice to be a residential real estate appraiser. And I worked with him for just about 7 years. And I did thousands of appraisals in South Florida in 3 counties. And we did review appraisals on bad appraisers and good appraisers. So we had some experience there. And one of the things that we experience all the time in this business as I transitioned over to selling is that appraisers and realtors are on 2 different planets. Appraisers are always looking in that little rearview mirror, and you guys are always looking in the windshield, right? So you have different perspectives. If we have this building appraised today, they're going to pull comps within the last year and adjust them, and they're going to get a very tight range, hopefully, of what this place is worth. And that's really not what it's worth today, right? It's what it's worth 6 months ago when those comps sold. The market's always moving. It's always moving up. It's always moving down. It's always moving laterally, right? It doesn't seem like movement when it's lateral, but it's a fluid piece. So I created this grid, which is kind of a simplified version of the sales comparison grid. Okay, the sales comparison grid is that page 2 on the appraisal that you always go look at to see what the number came in. This is what the grid looks like. Let me move this just a touch here. So what I did is I broke everything down. So you hear realtors always talking about price per square foot, which is a major mistake. It's too broad. It's like painting, detailed military figures with a paintbrush. You're not going to get much out of this, right? It's good for tract homes. So if you're selling a house for D.R. Horton, they got 300 homes, they got 5 models, they're all within 400 or 500 square feet. Sure, you can use price per square foot to shoot from the hip. If you want to be Clint Eastwood out there with your clients, you can use that because you have to sometimes talk off the hip. We're not constantly researching behind the computer to have intelligent conversations. We're more in the estimation department at times, but it's easier to be accurate when you're dealing with a very light product. But in the real world, like a building like this, good luck finding a comp like this. What an old historic house that's been, in a gentrified area that's been rezoned and repurposed for commercial building. It might be hard to find a 100-year-old building within 1 mile to do this, right? And that's fortunately and unfortunately, fortunately because it makes it interesting, unfortunately, that's where we run into problems. So when you guys are doing new construction or you're selling in a neighborhood where the houses are all 5 years old and they're within 200 square feet of each other, you probably don't really need me, right? You can get a reasonable idea of what it's going to take to list the house and to sell it. But when you're dealing with stuff that's a little different, that's when I jump onto something like this. This comp 3 doesn't belong on this, just for records. I always copy off my last CMA just because some of the blanks will be filled out. So this was a comp on another grid. But this grid is what I want to talk to you about. This is what makes me very structured in my approach to value. So everyone should have gotten emailed this. If you don't have it, Amanda has it downstairs, so we can get it over to you and you can use it, and you can change on the bottom. It's got my name and all that stuff. You can just type right over it. It's editable. So you can put your name, your logo, your phone number, and just claim it as your own if you like what we're going to talk about today. Okay? So I break everything down into line item adjustments because that's what appraising is. There's 3 approaches in the real estate world to value. One is the cost approach. The cost approach is kind of like what the insurance cost of the house is. What is the land worth? What does it cost to build this property? And then what are we going to depreciate the building for being not new, for being 10 years old, right? And then it does site improvements, and it gives you an idea of what it would cost to replace the property. Not necessarily market value, but it's tied to market value because if this place burnt down to today and we had to build it in 3 months' time, we want to know what the current construction costs and the current value are and reconcile those two matters. The cost approach used to be used on appraisals like I'm in my 40s, but all throughout my 20s and I think even my early 30s, they still used it and they eliminated it. right? Because it's the most manipulated number there. It's the least honest way of approaching things oftentimes, right? Because a building like this could be $165 a square foot to build, it could be $205 a square foot to build. With Holly and Deanna's upfit, you know, it was probably on the higher side, frankly, right? And the building that we use as a comp might not be that way. So the cost approach is still a fundamental approach to value, but it's not as applicable as the other two. The other two is the sales comparison approach, which is what we all use in our CMAs. They're just comps, right? We take like property, we break it down, and we write the features on each side, and then we adjust them. And this bottom number tells us where the close to market value is. Now, we're not appraisers, so we never say that the market value of your house, like the exact estimation of what your house is worth, because we're not qualified to do that. But we say the market value ranges between this price, and I think we should list at this price and land here, and that's our approach, right? So we use the sales comparison approach all the time. The other approach that we often don't use unless we get into commercial, unless you're dealing with multi-units. So multi-units, any duplex, triplex, or fourplex is considered residential portfolio lending. So you can go get a fourplex and go get your loan at BB&T. Anything that's over 4 units is considered commercial, and then you get a commercial appraiser and oftentimes different lending. Okay, so 4 units or down, we almost always use this. But when a property is actually creating income, there's a thing called the income approach. So if I buy an 8-unit apartment, and that 8-unit apartment is worth $800,000, then we know that it's generating an income of maybe $80,000 a year, right? Or maybe $120,000 a year. It depends. Typically, investors like to get about 10% back on their investment, but the way that it works out on an income approach is the actual income that the structure or the property is generating is directly correlated to the value of the property, right? Just like a business. So today we're going to just talk about the sales comparison approach. And when you're doing that, we want to break every single thing down. So when we're looking for comps, we always start closest to the subject, right? The subject is the property that you're going to list or that you're going to put an offer for. So we break everything down into the subject, comps 1, comp 2, and comp 3. We put the address down there, where it's at, the closing date, the list price, the days on the market, and the sale price. What are the 3 things people want to know when you're listing their house? How much is my house worth? Right? How long is it going to take to sell? And what should we list it for? But we have all that right here. We know that your house is going to be worth whatever we adjust this for if we do the job right. It's called the paired sales analysis. That's how we get the adjustments. I'll get into that. We know that the average days in the market, like this one doesn't belong in here, but if it's 3 days, 34 days, 17 days, 11 days, if I use 5 or 6 comps, I normally use more than 3, right? That grid that we sent you has up to 6. But you add all those days on the market and you divide it by however many comps you had and you have the average days on the market. So if I'm able to go to somebody and say, hey, listen, your house is probably worth about $163,000 and the average days on the market are 4 or 5 days on the market, things are going really fast, and the average sale price is more than the list price or pretty close to it, I'd say we can push the envelope and go to the high side. So we don't need a 1-year listing agreement. We can do a 3-month listing agreement, which might help you edge out the other agents that are trying to lock these people down forever, right? That could be a selling point. And the other thing is that when you show up with this document, there is no disputing the price, because when I go to you guys to go list a property and I tell you what the house is worth, if it doesn't sync with what your emotional expectation was, I'm not a good realtor for you, right? That's what so let's just take all of that out, because to be objective shouldn't be penalized. So what we do is we break down all the comps. I bring active listings because that's what they're competing against. So if you're in a subdivision, it's great. Just pull the active listings in there and say, hey, we have to be the prettiest house for the price, and these are currently on the market. So how do we fit in with this? Then I take pending sales because that helps me with the days on the market. We know how long it took from list price to somebody actually pulling the trigger and getting a signed offer on the property. But I use closed sales on the grid because it stipulates everything. What it was listed, how many days on the market, what it sold for, and what were the details of the house. Okay? So those closed sales are going to determine value. Nothing else. Pending, active, it's all theory. Closed sales actually happen. It's fact. It's data. We can look back, we can analyze it, and then we can use it to bracket what a property's worth that we're unsure of. Okay? So when you're pulling a comp, pull within the subdivision as close as you can. All right, the next main thing is you want to try to make sure that the schools line up. That's something that appraisers have a blind spot on. They'll pull comps in a neighborhood that's a mile away, but it's in a whole different school district, and they might not adjust for the school district. because that could be a big reason why certain properties are selling faster than others, right? So what's very cool about being an actual agent is that you don't have to deal with underwriters and all the confines and rules that appraisers have to deal with. You can actually interpret the market for exactly what's happening. So when you pull comps in your neighborhood. Try to stay within a couple hundred, 300-400 square feet in size. I would never want to have a comp that's 2240 and 1532 without having another comp that's closer in square footage. I might have to take a lower one because I like to bracket. So if I have like an apple in a bowl of mixed fruit, I might want a banana and a kiwi, something smaller, something bigger, right? We want to bracket. If you're looking for a brand new car, you might be looking for a 7 Series BMW, but you still might look at a Mercedes, and you might look at a Lexus. You want to bracket. You want to know what the bottom side and the high side is, so you can start narrowing and filtering it down, just like you do with clients. You have a client that's interested in looking at a house. You set up 5 houses for them. As you start observing their behavior and having discussions throughout the day, you start narrowing them down. I think we're wasting time when we're looking at this, because new construction seems to be what you want. Let me show you new construction neighborhoods, right? You like 8-foot doors and not 6-foot doors? We shouldn't be looking at houses from 1978, right? So we're constantly doing that. Here, we're just gonna do it on paper. We're gonna narrow things down and we're gonna bracket. So we pull closed sales and we do line by line data. So our house was built in 1955. This house was built in 1963. What's the difference between 1955 and 1963? If you're looking back at it in 2019, not much. These houses have been renovated, hopefully, once. Sometimes not. We've all been in the ruts, right? I'll tell you, hang out long enough and it becomes mid-century modern and you don't have to do anything. Just put a low back couch in there. So, but these houses have had a facelift at least once. Some of them have been touched 2 or 3 or 4 times, right? And trends are funny. They don't last very long. Have you guys gone in a house recently that was like built in 2004? You're like, oh my God, this whole place is dated. It's like, what? What, granite's not in anymore? Well, I mean, yeah, granite's kind of in, but it's not as in as quartz, right? Or marble, or wood chopping block mix of an island, right? So things are different. I mean, they're constantly fluidly changing. So if you're gonna adjust on trends, you're gonna have a hard time, right? But you wanna adjust kind of on 2 different elements here that you have to reconcile. One is upgrades are not maintenance items. If you replace your roof and it costs you $25,000 to replace your roof, you might not get the $25,000 back because that's maintenance. It's hard to sell a house with a leaking roof, right? So you have to get your clients shifted in the mentality where the things that you repaired to continue to make the house habitable is not necessarily an upgrade. Whereas, the new cabinets and kitchen granite countertops and farm sink and stainless steel appliances might be an upgrade in the kitchen more than a maintenance item. So you want to separate them into 2 separate things, okay? This way you can start getting them away from what they spent to more in line with what they spent and impacts the value in this category. This is where we're gonna get our money, right? When you see house flips, you don't ever see them excited to replace a hot water heater, right? You're not gonna get that $1,000 back, but when they paint the inside and put hardwood floors down, everybody's excited because you normally get more money on cosmetics, unless you're selling the house to my dad. Then my dad's like, how was the roof? When was the HVAC service? He doesn't care necessarily if it's got quartz countertops. Doesn't matter to him. So you gotta know your buyer, and that's why houses that we never think will sell fast sometimes, and houses that we think will blow off the market are a bit of a struggle because the buyers are such a variation of what their needs are. But for the general public, we've been able to realize that cosmetic upgrades is typically a good thing, right? And maintenance items are typically things that just kind of have to be done. So you want to separate that a little bit. So we're going to go age, we're going to go lot size. Lot size is important. If you have a 2-acre parcel of property and everybody else is 5 acres, there's probably a differential between that land. You don't want to make any assumptions on values, by the way. Like, for example, 1955 to 1963, I think that's a very minute difference for an 8-year span of houses now that we're looking 50 years later here, right? Doesn't make much of a difference. But if the market was showing that there should be an adjustment for that, I'm going to make it. Because it doesn't matter if it meets my sensibility, it just matters what the market's saying, okay? So let's just get this filled out, at least conceptually here together, and then we'll start talking about how to adjust them, right? So we're gonna go year built, lot size, view. Let's talk about views for a second. Residential to me is just when it backs another house or another condo or whatever, like property, okay? If it's on a golf course, you'll put that there. If it's on Lake Norman or Lake Wylie, you'll put that there. If it backs a commercial industrial building, you'll put that there. You know, do you guys know the term of something that backs or is affected, its value is affected by an external item like power lines, or maybe a school that could be positive or a negative, depends on your client, or industrial buildings or an airport pathway? That's called an external obsolescence. That means something external from the property is having an impact on the value. If you're on a very busy road, right? So for commercial, being on Monroe Road would be great, right? But if you were residential and you had 2 kids that were under 7, you know, this might not be your first choice, right? So it depends on what property that you're looking at, but you want to state what it is and you want to be very clear. When I go on MLS, I always click on the maps, on the satellite maps, so I can get an idea of what its surroundings are like, because that actually that makes a difference. When you guys have a house in a cul-de-sac versus a house on a main road, you would probably stipulate that in the MLS, right? So anything that we perceive as value, someone else might perceive as value, and we want to state it. We don't have to necessarily adjust for it, depends on what the market says, but we want to state it right here, okay? Condition, this is always a fun place to work. The condition of the property, this adjustment is going to help mitigate the difference between a house that's been renovated and a house that hasn't. If you have houses in the 50s or 60s that you're looking at trying to list, and some of the houses have had total gut to the drywall removed renovations, and other houses have had a facelift and like 7 layers of paint, you know, on the wall, there's going to be an adjustment for the difference. You will obviously want to find properties that have been renovated, but you might not have 4 or 5 closed sales that have sold in the last 6 months that have been equally renovated. This is where you're going to adjust, and you could be as specific as you want. It doesn't have to be average or fair or good. It could be, you could do Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 based on quality levels, 4 being the best, 1 being the worst. You can do whatever you want. All you have to do is be able to communicate why you have this and how it impacts the seller, right? So you could put remodeled, original, you know, total renovation, and just make your adjustments accordingly. That's where you do it. Rooms, what defines a room? It's got 4 walls, right?
A window.
A window, that could define a bedroom,
Yeah.
but you can have a room that still has no window, like in a basement, and still a room, right?
Right.
Actually, let me think about it, 3 walls. 3 walls is a room, right? So when you have a dining area, like our house, we have a really modern house, so we have, my wife wanted a big kitchen island that overlooked the dining area, so she's not disconnected from the family when she's in there. So we have a dining area. It's not a small space, it's probably 250 square feet, but it's not a room, right? It's just an area, it's got 2 walls. So every room in the house, we put under total rooms. So kitchen, living room, family room, keeping room, you know, if it's a big enough laundry room to note, loft upstairs, office, those are total rooms, plus all the bedrooms. So this has got 6 rooms, 4 bedrooms, and 2 bathrooms. So that means that there was probably a living room and a kitchen, because it's a smaller house, and then they had 4 bedrooms, and then 2 bathrooms. Now if this had 3 bedrooms, would there be a difference in value between a 3-bedroom and a 4-bedroom in this neighborhood? Maybe. Maybe you would just cover it in the square footage, because would you rather have a boxy 2,240 square feet, or would you rather have an expansive 1,532 square feet, right? For me, if I adjust for this guy being 700 square feet smaller, I might not adjust for an extra bedroom, because for me, I'd rather have more open space than boxy rooms. Whereas if you have 3 kids, that 4th bedroom's worth everything, right? So you just want to look at the market, and you're going to deduct what the market's saying. Basement, anything that's below ground, whether it's a walkout or a totally enclosed basement, is where you're going to put right here. Oftentimes basements are partially finished or completely finished, and there's some mechanical room space that's not. You're going to put a slash and then put what the unheated square footage is there. You want to do a line-by-line adjustment on anything that has a basement. Now, if you have homes that have basements and yours doesn't, try to get homes that don't have basements, right? Because the buyer's different. You might get more of a northeastern crowd looking for the basements, you know? Go ahead.
I ask a ton of questions, I always do.
Good.
But this is what's getting me recently, is
Okay.
that we're seeing split levels
Yeah.
where the agents are putting it as basement. My understanding was always basement below grade
Yes.
to some degree.
Yes.
But the split levels, it's like you've got your main level,
Yeah.
and now they're trying to say basement because
Yeah.
it's below what they consider the main level.
It is. To me, it's a little bit more semantics. So we used to call them tri-levels, right? Because
Right.
you walk into a 4, you go down, or you go up,
Yeah.
right? So to me, it's more of like a basement, because if you know, if you have to be on your toes to exit that little transom window, you sort of kind of like in the basement. But I don't know if I would give it lesser value than the second floor on that design, because it's also kind of part of the architecture. So, and that's hard because normally when you have split levels, you don't always have a ton of split levels to use it as comps. It's actually a very specific buyer, right? So if you have a buyer base that's in their 70s, going up and down stairs every day might be less appealing than if it was just a ranch, right? But if it's a young neighborhood, going up and down stairs is just a, you know, a task of life, no big deal, right?
Is that something though that appraisers look at?
No,
Like if
I think appraisers have blinders on, and I think that we look at all the emotional things, and that's actually what drives market value. So being an appraiser, we always hated realtors because it seems like you guys didn't know anything, and you showed up and you made more money than we were, so we were upset, you know. and then being realtors, you kind of hate the appraiser because you're like, listen, man, what are you, just the drag of every party?
Right.
You know, every time we get going, you hit the emergency brake. You're using comps from a whole other town. You know, you look like you haven't talked to another human being in many months. I used to go to CE for appraisers, and it's like, wow, this is a group that I do not identify with, you know? So, and then I go to realtor parties and I feel the same exact way, right? So, you tell me. But the point is that, you know, they are actually geared to think differently. Appraisers are looking in the past, which is important because honestly, you know, appraisers will help keep a market much tighter. We don't grow necessarily as fast, but it's more stable. Realtors will sell things from $100 a square foot to $1,000 a square foot because we're based on commission, right? So the market could be a yo-yo, and we're like, oh, it's great. And then next you're like, listen, who's got Xanax in their purse, right? So it totally depends. But appraisers are more methodical. Now the problem with appraisers is that they are ruled by underwriters. Someone's sitting behind a computer, potentially in another state, that's going to dictate what the appraiser's adjustments are to make sure they don't exceed a single line adjustment or 6 months in closing date or a mile in geography. And oftentimes it's not a perfect climate to do an appraisal because the data that is sold recently isn't available. So you have to stretch out a little bit. I mean, you can't say I'm not going to do an appraisal for you because it's an inconvenient time. You use what you have and you make the adjustments accordingly. So, but I'm talking to realtors, and we're in the business of selling houses. So I'm leaning less on the appraisal side without abandoning it totally. Because most realtors, I feel like when they go out to a listing, they go out there with a range of what they think the house is worth. And if the other people just shake their head, good. It's another one. That's great. And I don't think we have to go about that business. Like, so I sold, just to give you a heads up using this approach, I came up here when I was 28. I took a year off, and then I went to RE/MAX at 29. And I'm going to be 42 here. So in that period of time, this is why I look older than 42, because I went through 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay? So when I came out here, I kind of hung my hat on this because